Hey everyone, welcome to this special edition of All Points. We're glad you could join us today, and we hope that you'll enjoy this program on very good special New Year's or New Year's Eve good luck foods. I'm Dr. Dave Lucas. This is All Points Special Edition. If you're looking for All Points, you found it, and if you haven't been looking for All Points but are interested in New Year's foods here in the United States, you found the great video for you as well. So welcome. We're glad that you're here, and Happy New Year to all of you if you're watching this in and around New Year, but if not, well, that's okay. Because we're going to give you a baker's dozen of foods that we discovered through doing a poll that people use during the New Year's time. Either New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, they eat these or a combination of these elements to celebrate the new year coming in. So we hope you enjoy it. Let's get right down to it. What do you think the first food is? Well, before we do that, please share this video. It doesn't take a second for you to hit that share button. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you want to make sure that you like the video and also share that video. But subscribe to our channel so that you can find all the videos that we do that are interesting, sometimes a little quirky, a little different, always a mystery, and always a mystery solved. So thanks for watching us. I'm Dr. Dave, your host. Let's follow along now as we check out. What do you think the first food, number one on our list? What was the most liked food, most used food to celebrate New Year's Eve or New Year's Day? Yes, you probably guessed it, sauerkraut. Now, this was originally a dish from Germany. They still serve it and eat it over in Germany all the time. It also became popular in Ireland, some in England, but especially Scotch and the Irish. And of course, they brought it over here to New York, and they brought it also over to the Appalachian area where we are in southern Ohio, where this video is originated. So we want to know, do you eat sauerkraut? My mom did. She would make sauerkraut. My grandmother would. When I was a boy at home, come in from the farm, and there would be that sauerkraut cooking for the New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, and it smelled to me like boiling dirty socks. But I'm sure there are a lot of you who like it. If you like it, put it in the comments. Oh yeah, Dr. Dave, I love sauerkraut for New Year's Day. And it comes from cabbage. And the reason they ate sauerkraut, it comes from cabbage because it represented money. Money, money, money. Well, we'll do more of that, but that's the first one. What do you think the second one is? Let's take a look here. See what we got. Oh yeah, some of you know this too. Collard greens. Collard greens. Now, of course, these greens too can be cut up and they're boiled with some bacon and some salt. And a pretty simple dish to make, but a lot of people like collard greens. If you like collard greens, if your family have eaten collard greens over the years for New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, or maybe you say, hey, no, we don't have any New Year's traditions, but we're going to try that, well, then collard greens would be the one that you would want to try. Now, we never ate collard greens on the farm. I have over the years as I traveled, and I've traveled all over the United States and into Canada and down into Mexico. I've eaten collard greens in the States, especially in the South. Some of these dishes originated in the South. And again, I'm not real sure why that those kind of dishes, they're either superstitious or they're traditional, they're heritage, or they're an ethnic background. I'm not sure why a lot of those come from the South, but collard greens is one of them that came from the South. Now, what do you think another one is? Well, here's a good one. Everybody knows about ring cake. Now, this particular ring cake is a fruit cake, but they make ring cakes of various flavors. And this is also in Mexico. They make a king's bread sometimes in a ring, and they bake little kings in there or little babies in there, sometimes little images in there, little Jesus images, whatever, and you bring the king's bread the next year. So a lot of times these ring cakes represent eternal life or good health, and because a ring, of course, as you know, represents eternal life or a good long life. And so these ring cakes were also very valuable for people. And like I said, I've had ring cake over the years as I've traveled. I especially noticed it, not necessarily the fruit cakes, I especially noticed this up in the northern areas, northern New England and on the East Coast. These ring cakes were kind of celebrated and sometimes they're called bundt cakes. They're made for the holiday season of the new year, sometimes served with coffee or hot tea. And sometimes even for breakfast, they're a sweet cake. So what do you like? If you haven't heard, we've got a baker's dozen for you on this list today, but if you haven't heard your list, well then you probably want to put your food down there and let us know, hey, this is what we eat. How about this? How about this one? Huh? How about this one right here? Here's a good one. A lot of people like this, black-eyed peas. Now, did you know that the black-eyed peas, not the musical group, but the black-eyed peas that we eat, they're a bean. And so there are a lot of beans. We just use black-eyed peas as a sample for you, but a lot of people use black-eyed peas and other beans. Green beans work, lima beans work. Sometimes people have lima beans New Year's Day. They have some sort of a bean as a part of this meal. And like I said, sometimes they put this together in combination, and we'll get more into that as we get near the end of our Baker Dozen list. But these, because they're green, and they also represent coins. Now, I know they don't look like a coin, but that's sort of the thought behind it. They're eating coins, and so you get lots of coins, collect a lot of coins, and you're very fortunate and happy and so forth. And so those black-eyed peas are often well thought of during this holiday season. What else? Well, here's an interesting one. Everybody thinks about this, having pork. This is a pork tenderloin here, but a lot of times people will make pork, various kinds of pork. They have that with the collard greens, or they have that with the black-eyed peas, or the lentils, or the green beans, so that sometimes the lima beans, so that they can enjoy their New Year's Day and be fortunate, because the pig is fat and plump, and it represents health and wealth and good diet and good food. You know, used to, back years ago, people, men especially, didn't like women that were real skinny. They wanted them plump because they were probably good cooks and so forth. Now, you know, don't get all over me about being womanizer or whatever. None of that has anything to do with what I'm talking about. It's just the traditions that people had years ago. They wanted a wife that was plump. They wanted a cook that was plump because they felt like that person, as a female, would do a good job in their home. And so, you know, this kind of pork idea is the pig is plump and pork is kind of a fatty food. We know we render lard out of that. And so they kind of looked at that as being a riches idea. Now, it may not be why you eat pork, but that's what a lot of people did. So what else? Well, here's one interesting, and this one I think is done by a lot of people, grapes. You're supposed to line up, and you can put these in a cup, 12 grapes for each guest at your New Year's Eve party, or you can do it New Year's Day. But here's what they do. New Year's, as it counts down, when you get to the last minute of the old year, you're supposed to throw 12 grapes in your mouth and chew them up and eat them. Now, that's a little difficult if they're seeded grapes. If they're seedless, you're okay. But if they've got seeds, you might run into a problem. And so we want to make sure that as we talk about this, that you understand that these grapes are supposed to be eaten in the very last moment as the bell tolls, if you will. So seeded grapes, or unseeded grapes probably would be better. That's a pretty interesting tradition. We never did that. We went to church and did what they called a New Year's Eve watch. And we would get to church around 6:30, 7 o'clock, have a little meal. They would have pork, and they would have some kind of beans, sometimes mashed potatoes, collard greens, or so on. And then we would sing songs and watch for the new year to come in. What are your traditions? Write those down in the comments so that we can share those. Here's another one a lot of people do, cornbread. Now, cornbread and cornmeal, anything that's got to do with corn, even sometimes they serve up canned corn that they canned right in the fall. They serve it up here at New Year's Eve or New Year's Day because it's golden and it represents gold. And again, this is the look of riches. So you take the cornbread, you cut it in half, and you smear butter all over it, and people are real, real happy. So this cornbread is also a neat idea for people that they like to do. So maybe you have corn, maybe you have cornbread, and you put that with collard greens, your pork, and sometimes you can have a bacon and so forth, because again, these are all ideas of wealth and of fertility sometimes, and health, and kind of the idea of the biblical concept or expression, the fatted calf. All that has to do with what we're talking about here on New Year's. Now, how about this one? Now, this is an interesting story. I didn't know this, I never heard of this, but pomegranate. Now, the Greeks and the Romans, for New Year's, as they get ready to celebrate their New Year's, the New Year coming in, and a lot of cultures have Chinese have a different New Year, but most of the different cultures have a new year, and they throw this pomegranate against the door, and then the seeds are supposed to represent the children and the grandchildren and how you're going to be bountiful in your heritage and your home and your family. I would make quite a mess, but some people still cut pomegranate and serve to their guests and still have pomegranate or pomegranate juice for their guests. And this sometimes I have had as I've gone through the United States, pomegranate juice as the drink for the New Year's Eve party. A lot of people didn't want it and they didn't like it. Sometimes they had different juices, pomegranate juice, they had grape juice, cranberry juice, and so forth. So sometimes they had orange juice and so forth. So that's just a concept also. So if you've got something different, well, you want to be sure and let us know. All right, here's another one. Now this probably comes originally either from our Italian friends or also the Asian friends, because there are different kinds of noodles. There's noodles that come from Italy, the spaghetti, and the different kinds of noodles that they make, the wide noodles. There's the egg noodles that a lot of people make for Thanksgiving, but these noodles, especially from the Asian culture, represent long life. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because they represent what we want out of our lives, and we want to have a long life. And so if you and your family have eaten noodles of any kind on the New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, it's probably why, because that represents a long life. Again, it could just be a tradition of your family. It doesn't mean you're superstitious. I don't want anybody to panic and think, oh my gosh, my family, we're all superstitious. That may not be the case, but you want to take a look at that and see what happens. All right, we'll take another look here. Here's a good one. I like this. This is one of my favorite slides out of this whole program. This fish. Now fish, again, represents good luck. The goldfish in Asia, especially in Japan, represents good luck. But fish in general is good luck. There's stories about young people finding coins in the fish's mouth. That's also a biblical story. So this whole idea of fish represents forward motion. Fish move forward. Pigs eat forward. And so this whole idea of the pig representing the new year or the fish representing the new year is that fish swim forward and they don't go backwards. And so that's the whole concept, that may your progress in the new year be positive and bountiful and so forth. And so that's why a lot of people employ fish for their New Year's Eve meal or the New Year's Day meal. Do you eat fish? Maybe you eat fish and something green and something gold. Maybe you eat something that represents a coin, black-eyed peas and fish. A lot of the in the South, they do that. Black-eyed peas, collard greens, and fish, especially if you're on the coast. So we want to know what you do for the New Year's, but we think that's pretty interesting. All right. From our Hispanic friends, we have the tamales. Now the tamales are an interesting food. They're a little difficult to make homemade from scratch. You can buy these tamales, but I remember taking some boys from Nebraska down to Mexico to help me. They volunteered to help me build a hospital down there, and they worked very, very hard. I found all the people that volunteered from Nebraska, and they call them the Cornhuskers. There's a reason I'm telling this story. They call them the Cornhuskers. They really worked hard. They were real hard workers. They got up early in the morning. They worked all day, never complained. And so one year we were down there building this hospital, and on New Year's Eve, I went out and I found a woman who made these tamales there in Mexico where we were working, and I had 120 of these tamales made. She worked a long, long time on them. We had two different kinds. We had 60 of the red tamales and 60 of the green tamales. And I took them out to the place we were staying. We were staying on a farm, a mission farm. And I'll never forget how much fun we had that night. And if you're from Nebraska and you went with me to Mexico, you may still remember that tamales meal. I think I ate 12 or 13 of those. Some guys ate 15, some ate 17. But the reason they're so important to the Hispanic culture, especially Mexican, is because they represent gold, which is the meal, the cornmeal they're made out of. They're stuffed, and so they're packed full, so it's kind of a full kind of a sensation. that there's nothing lacking. And good for a new year. And you can get them in chicken or beef. She made both kinds, red and green. And so, you know, it was real good there. Of course, red and green, of course, have always been the colors of Christmas. You're going in the new year, so forth and so on. But if you have tamales, why, that's a neat tradition. And if you've never had tamales, you might want to look into that. You can buy tamales at the store. They're not quite as good. They're wrapped in corn husk. Take the corn husk off. You're not really supposed to eat the corn husk. Nebraska corn huskers, they could eat them. But I'll take the corn husk off. That's so that it holds that steam in there, makes a nice doughy kind of dish, a really delicious meal to have. And you can have beans with it, or you could have black-eyed peas if you want to. Now, what about, I never had this. Maybe you did. Maybe you had this. Let's take a look at this. Yeah? Soft, sweet pretzels. Now, we did that because these pretzels move all around and kind of represent long life. We don't use salted pretzels necessarily, but the sweet ones, the sort of a dessert pretzel. And the reason that a lot of people eat those is because they want to have a happy, sweet, and wonderful new year. And so if you use pretzels, let me know. I'd never heard of that before, but that was our baker's dozen. Let's go back over these. I've got my list here so I don't leave anything out. Sauerkraut, collard greens, rice, black-eyed peas, pork, grapes, cornbread, pomegranate, noodles, fish, ring cake, tamales, sweet soft pretzels. I'm going to make sure I show you the rice. I think I did, but if I didn't, let's go back and pick that up. I think I might have shown you that rice. Again, this comes from some of our Asian friends, but a lot of people use rice. Rice is a grain and a staple. It can be white or it can be brown, but rice represents fertility, good growth, good crops, and so forth. So from an agricultural standpoint and an agricultural setting, that's what it would be. So once again, the list that we have from our poll: sauerkraut number 1, collard greens number 2, rice number 3, which surprised me, black-eyed peas number 4, not a surprise, pork number 5, then grapes, cornbread, pomegranate, noodles, fish, ring cake, tamales, and sweet, soft pretzels. What's your dish for New Year's? What do you eat New Year's Eve? What's your tradition? What's your clan do? Put it in the comments below. I'm Dr. Dave Lucas. You've been watching this particular special edition of All Points. Thanks, and next week we'll see you again on All Points, talking about people and places and professions, and this week, just New Year's food. God bless. See you next week.